Hello, I'm Connor Pendergrast, and welcome to episode 1 of Support Stack Solo. So, hello, if this is your first time on Support Stack, this is not the usual format. Today, what I'm going to do is a slightly different version where it's just me talking through one thing that I've seen. If you like what you've seen, click the subscribe button in this video, and you can also like the video as well. That would be very helpful. So what I'm talking about today is I'm seeing a lot more interest anyway in Finn's procedures. So procedures is the evolution of Finn tasks. If that's something that you've heard of, then they're the same idea. Finn procedures is like the version, probably version 3 of it at this point. And what I'm seeing is a lot more questions. How do we use procedures? How do we get them set up? What makes a good procedure? And I actually think that the starting point here should be, okay, what are you building first? So I'm creating this video to talk you through how I've created one of my ideas for my own website, actually, for my own Intercom workspace, and also to give some thoughts on what makes a great Finn procedure and how to set that up effectively. So you can see on my screen, I've got a couple of points here. This is just my little Notion document, and this is a bit dramatic. Everybody builds the wrong procedure first, but what makes a great procedure experience? So what is it that makes Finn's procedures really effective is that they can be fast. So Finn can respond to customers in a couple of seconds. There's less waiting involved. So there's no loading. There's no like, oh, wait, my system's being a bit slow. So you can get back to customers really quickly. It also makes it very efficient for your customers and also makes it very clear. So you can have procedures that are really clear for the customer. But as long as as you're designing them and always have an obvious path to a human. What I like about that is there should always be a route to a human. That's my own philosophy. I always think that customer support is a great skill set, and we are always going to need humans inside the customer support organizations. And if you don't do that, you're just going to end up with really frustrated customers. So then, is this actually a procedure? So questions around, okay, well, what is it that you will need to make a procedure? So not everything has to be a procedure, obviously enough. Finn has a whole bunch of ways of interacting with customer conversations, and procedures are just one tool in Finn's tool set. So typically a procedure will be great. You can have a process that's a good candidate for a procedure when it has multiple steps, when it maybe has some branching logic in there as well. It can use data from other systems, although my example that we'll talk through later actually doesn't really need any other systems. It's just gathering information from a potential lead in this case. And it also has a structured conversation. So it's gathering information from the customer most of the time before moving on. And then you should also use it when you want consistent handling of the process as well. So don't use a procedure. So here's some good examples of where you should not use a procedure. So don't use a procedure when you cannot articulate a logical step-by-step approach. If it's sort of a bit experimental how you approach these things, then either keep it with Finn, but more likely keep it with your human teammates. They're going to be the ones who can bring their creativity to it, and later on start to document the processes in a more structured, formal way. Don't use a procedure when you have a Knowledge Hub article that will answer it perfectly well. If it's just a how-to or an informational question, then your procedure is not the best route there. Don't use a procedure when Finn guidance also handles it well. So for example, maybe it's picking up attributes from user attributes, and then you have guidance to tell Finn how to engage with people on those user attributes. And also don't use a full procedure when a standalone data connector does the job. Data connectors are incredibly powerful and can be used to answer questions pretty effectively. And also Finn will sometimes, I've seen it happen, sometimes chain together multiple data connectors, even outside of a task, if it thinks it can use it. So those are some ideas about when to use procedures and when not to use procedures. Procedures, they're just structured processes and instructions that give Finn the ability to do some pretty interesting and pretty complicated jobs. I would say it works really well if you have like a large amount of data that you would want to quickly get from a different system, pull it in, and then use it to answer a customer query. But it always requires a lot of guidance and steps to interpret the data for Fin as well. So I'm going to show you the example. So I talked out loud to a combination of Claude and ChatGPT as well, and eventually got to the point where I was defining this. So basically what I realized was I would like to have, as a lot of us do, on my own website, which is customersuccess.cx, I want to set up a lead qualification system so that people can get the right kind of help from me, depending on what they need, but without always having to come to me one-to-one. So I've got this little document, and so what I did was I talked through it with Claude and with ChatGPT, and I'm actually going to make a skill that you can use, and I'll post a link to that in the video down below, that will help you go through this process and talk it through. So it talks about the problems and why I think it's important. The qualifications take my time. They don't respond immediately to the potential leads. And then I also want to make sure that they understand what it is actually that I'm able to give and not able to give. And then it talks through like what I always want and the disqualifiers for people I just don't work as well with. And so yeah, it's all these kind of details. And it also records like what are the attributes we're going to do. So what's the information that we're going to process here in the procedure, and say, okay, for example, if they have used tasks and procedures or they have data connectors, then great, they're an advanced person. If they have Fin enabled and lightly configured basic, or Fin is not enabled, then it's not enabled. It gets recorded there. It's the team context, the number of people who they have using Intercom, and that would be from a customer support perspective. And then the availability. So I don't have a huge amount of availability in 2026, but later in the year I'll have quite a bit more. So I don't want to set people up for disappointment. So yeah, so that'll all come together. I haven't built this yet. I'm going to build this on a later video. So like I said, if you do want to hear more about this, then subscribe to this YouTube channel. Or also go to my daily email list, week daily email list, which is customersuccess.cx/daily. That's customersuccess.cx/daily. So hopefully this is a useful overview of building, or not even building yet, but deciding on your first Fin procedure or your early Fin procedures, what makes a good procedure, what makes a don't start this yet procedure, and also an overview of an example of how I've talked through setting these procedures up. Like I said, I'll create a skill and pop it in as a link below. The other thing to mention at this point is I've got a new email series called the 5 Mistakes You're Making with Data Connectors and How to Fix Them. And you can see a link to that in the below as well. So that's customersuccess.cx/5 mistakes. That's the number 5 mistakes. And that will lead you through 5 emails, 1 email per mistake with a description of what the mistake is, and then a recommended approach, and one to do every day, not overwhelming. But if you're using data connectors, this is a really helpful resource based on my experience of implementing probably around 30 data connectors at this point. 25 to 30, somewhere around there, and mistakes that I've made and that I would really like you to not make. I think the maths on it is basically like if you solve 2 more conversations, you've probably made back the price of the email series. That's kind of worth it. So that's it. So that's customersuccess.cx/5 mistakes. Yeah, thank you very much. Like I said, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode of Support Stack Solo, which is episode 2, where I will be going through the process of setting up this procedure and showing you what that looks like. All right, bye.